Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's debate for the 12th Middlesex District State Rep race. This seat is open due to the retirement of Representative Ruth Balzer, and there are 3 candidates running in the Democratic primary on September 3rd. They'll introduce themselves. There's only that Democratic primary. Whoever wins that will go on to win the general election, since there are no other candidates from other parties running. Tonight's debate is sponsored by the Brookline Democratic Town Committee, the Newton Ward 5 Committee, the Newton Ward 6 Committee, the Newton Ward 7 Committee, and the Newton Ward 8 Democratic Committee. The candidates have been informed of the rules. I'm Joe Kaplan, Secretary of the Massachusetts Democratic Party and moderator for tonight's debate. All questions asked will be rotating among the 3 candidates. If I determine that the answer negatively impacts their opponent, then the person, if requesting, will have 30 seconds to make a statement about the subject. And by that, I mean if they feel they're unfairly represented or feel they need to straighten the record. It's not about a disagreement on any issue. The moderator could ask a follow-up question if he feels the candidate did not answer. There's a timekeeper here, Gabriel, who will be assisting in keeping the time. Gabriel Friedman Nadrich. We thank you for that. We thank you for your service tonight. The original person answering can have 30 seconds to make. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond. The original person answering can have 30 seconds to make a statement to the rebuttal. The moderator could also ask a follow-up question if the candidate did not answer. The timekeeper's here. The debate starts with a 2-minute opening statement from each candidate. We have 6 to 8 questions ready from the town award committees. Then each candidate will ask the other candidates 1 question with a follow-up if he feels it was not properly answered. The question can be different to each of their opponents. Questions asked should be kept to no more than 15 seconds so as not to look like the candidate is making a speech. The moderator will stop if it goes longer. Written questions from the audience will be screened to eliminate duplicates or nonsense ones before going to the moderator, who will decide which questions to ask until time runs out for closing. So we'll start with the opening statements. As I said, it's going to be ABC, so we're going to keep rotating. Question on the rotate, we'll start with candidate A. So I will say that candidate A will be Mr. Lipof first, and then we'll keep changing.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the committees for having us, the ward committees. And thank you, Joe. Good evening. I'm Rick Lipof, currently serving in my 23rd year as a city councilor, and I'm running to be your state representative. I was born and raised in Newton, and my parents were born and raised in Brookline, where my mother, Emily, was the rabbi at Temple or Havai Shalom for 18 years, so my roots run deep throughout the entire district. From stuffing envelopes as a child for multiple campaigns to co-chairing Seti Warren's campaigns, democratic politics and service is ingrained in my DNA. I have served as vice president of the council and chaired multiple committees and have always looked to bringing people together and finding a way to get to yes. I founded my real estate appraisal firm 33 years ago. Managing a diverse staff and budgets has given me a small business perspective, invaluable to pair with my decades of political service. At the State House, I will fight for our children to increase Chapter $70 and advocate for MSBA funds to improve our schools. I'll take action on climate, cutting greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning from fossil fuel to electrification, and I will preserve our open spaces. I will work to create efficient transportation that can change everything from where we live to how we live. I will fight for more affordable housing, for stronger gun control legislation, for reproductive rights, and for equitable, affordable health care. And I will do everything in my power to stamp out anti-Semitism and all forms of hate that have no place in our communities. I am proud of my endorsers, including State Treasurer Deb Goldberg, former Newton Mayor David Cohen, Brookline Select Board Member David Perlman, former Councilor John Rice, and Councilors Susan Albright, Vicki Damberg, Allison Leary, Andrea Kelly, and school committee members Emily Prenner and Tamika Olszewski, as well as every firefighter and police union in Brookline and Newton. And I hope to earn your vote as well.
Okay. Next, we go to Greg Schwartz.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for everybody to be here. So I'm Greg Schwartz. I'm running to be your next state representative from the 12th Middlesex. I'm running to fill the shoes of our esteemed rep, Ruth Balzer, who's done a great job over the last 25 years and who I'm happy to say has endorsed me in this race. So when I was 9 years old, my mother was diagnosed with early Parkinson's disease. And by the time I was a senior, I was taking her to her appointments because she was having trouble walking. It was at those visits that I saw lots of professional medical people. Some were compassionate and caring, some not so much. My family and I also saw that the system often really failed the patients. So it was then and there that I committed myself to a career in clinical medicine, but also trying to improve the system. I went to medical school and law school and trained in primary care. And for the last 20 years, I've been a practicing physician at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and at Mass General Hospital doing primary care, and at the same time continuing politics and policy work. As a physician, I fought for universal health care insurance in the state of Massachusetts, and on the city council, I worked for 8 years in Newton pushing for local issues. What you do as a medical doctor is you have an approach. It's a scientific, fact-based approach, and you meet with experts and you collaborate with your colleagues to get the best possible outcome for your patients. You also, as a primary care physician, are thinking about the future, taking action now to try to prevent harms later. I want to bring these approaches to the state legislature on the issues of environment, transportation, healthcare, and housing. I want to be there, talking to the experts, talking to my colleagues, building consensus. So please join me and put a doctor in the House. I ask for your vote on September 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Bill Humphrey.
I'm Newton City Councilor Bill Humphrey, a member of the Ward 5 Democratic Committee and former member of the Newton Dems Executive Committee. I'm running for the open 12th Middlesex House seat in the September 3rd Democratic primary because I believe that Massachusetts should be a commonwealth for everyone and a beacon for the nation. That's what this district expects of its representative, and I'm prepared to take on that challenge. We need a full-time state representative. We need a state representative who will answer constituent calls and emails. I've also knocked nearly 5,000 doors myself alone this year. And we also need a fighter right now. Governor Healey's ambitious agenda on climate and housing is stalled in the House of Representatives. We need an activist energy for the job right now, and we need someone with labor connections. I'm proud to be endorsed in this race by Mass Alliance, Progressive Massachusetts, the Mass Nurses Association, the Newton Teachers Association, the Roofers, the Teamsters, the Iron Workers, and SEIU. And these are all going to be helpful connections in working on the three biggest issues that voters talk about in this district: climate, housing, and transportation. And it's also going to be helpful on the huge range of other issues that we're all going to be having to push forward on over the coming years. I think it's also important in the context of this event to talk about the future of the Democratic Party. I think we do need new elected officials when open seats come up who can connect not only with our fantastic senior population of voters, but also some of the voters under the age of 45 who felt a little bit disenfranchised lately on the issues that they care about, like childcare, reproductive rights, diversity, LGBTQ rights, mental health, and above all, climate and housing. These are issues that I've worked on prior to the city council, on the city council in Delaware, where I went to college with the legislature there. And I'm really excited to get started here in Massachusetts in the 12th Middlesex district. Thank you.
Thank you. The ward and town committees sponsoring this debate have come up with 7 questions for us to ask the candidates. So this time I'll start with Greg Schwartz, then we'll go to Bill Humphrey, and then we'll go to Rick Lipof.
Is there a question?
Oh,
I was just going to talk for a little while.
Where'd you get that,
yeah,
Tom?
that's a good idea. Well, I said they submitted.
Is this the
questions.
singing
I didn't
part?
say I was going to ask them. As a state representative, how do you see yourself working with all of our local unions?
Well, it sounds like Bill's going to do all that, so I guess I won't have to.
Hey.
No, Rick too. So working with the unions is very important. Unions, labor movement in America is responsible for the great strides that we made in the 1900s and continuing to this day. We are a successful kind of nation because of our powerful and strong labor movement that has pushed for the kinds of protections that we need at work. I have lots of patients who are not unionized, who I see the difference, who come in with work-related issues, health issues, overwork issues, not being paid enough, and they are not well represented. I think that organized labor is very, very important. Now, how do you work with them? Obviously, you have an open door. I would certainly continue the efforts that Ruth Balzer has had. I think she'll meet with anybody, and I would meet with anybody as well. I've talked with all the unions, made sure that they understand that I'm a supporter. There are some differences sometimes that we have, as friends, you have to tell your friends when you differ with them. That's one thing that I hope that either of my colleagues who've been endorsed by the unions would be able to do if they did have to, so that the public good would be served. Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned, I have been endorsed very heavily at the state level by the unions that work closely with the state legislature. If you're in the House of Representatives in Massachusetts, you do end up seeing the representatives of the organized labor movement quite a lot. They're up there lobbying all the time. From my perspective, certainly growing up in a union household, my mom is a very active member of the Mass Nurses Association in her bargaining unit at the Brigham. I know that these are the folks that understand the conditions in the workplaces and how their workplaces operate better than anybody else. So I'm certainly very eager to listen to what they have to say when they say that there's something that needs to change. And I'm very confident that I have that relationship with them and have been certainly on more picket lines than I can count over the years. Certainly out there with my mom many times with the nurses. And I think it's also important to remember that, our job here is to not be disciplining them and telling them what they don't know or don't understand, but to be listening to and incorporating into legislation the things that they're pushing. A lot of these labor unions that have endorsed me have very extensive and ambitious agendas that are going to benefit everyone in the state if they're enacted. Particularly the healthcare unions have a very clear vision of what they think should be next for the healthcare sector that would benefit patients. And likewise, we know that something like a Green New Deal, which is absolutely essential above all else, is only possible with the active cooperation of organized labor. Thank you.
I'm extremely proud to have the endorsements of the police and firefighters unions from both Newton and Brookline, all of them, and the state firefighters union. I have those endorsements because I have supported their needs and their desires and listened and learned and advocated for them constantly over my 22 years as a city councilor. And I've done it with great joy. Because the touches that we have directly with these unions on a daily basis are ever present. My daughter stopped breathing at 6 weeks of age, and the first one to show up when we dialed 911 were the police, and they saved her. And this is the kind of connection that it goes beyond the political realm for me. So I'm quite proud of it, and the way I would work with them is the way I always have, which is to meet, to listen, to learn, and to advocate. Seti Warren came in to this city with 17 unsigned contracts We needed somebody strong in that moment, and he worked on all of them and got them all signed. A contract for a union has got to also be good for the city, and when you get it done and both parties walk away happy, that's something that I would always have my mind on. Finally, a discussion with Ruth and with Barney Frank in the last few months it showed me that the best part of this job is the constituent services and all you learn from meeting with your unions and other groups.
Okay, thank you. The next question, and we'll start with Bill Humphrey on this one. People who work in public sector jobs in Newton and elsewhere often earn more than the area median income. For Middlesex County in 2024, $130,000 for a two-person household, set for affordable housing, but not enough to pay market rates. What can the legislature do?
Is that a housing question? I can't.
Yeah,
Did you say that?
I believe, sure. I'll read it verbatim. People who work in public sector jobs in Newton and elsewhere often earn more than most of the MIA levels, area median income for Middlesex County in 2024, according to the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, or $130,000 for a two-person household, set for affordable housing, but not enough to pay market rates. What can the legislature do? I think to me, I think the first part's a comment and the second is about.
It's just saying it's too
Well, it's
much.
about housing. Yeah.
It's too much for affordable housing.
So okay, that the question is essentially that the public sector incomes in many cases are above the level to qualify for affordable housing, but that these folks still need a place to live, of course. And I think that's true not just of the public sector jobs. I mean, I was talking to one of the unions today that represents some of the poorest workers in the state, and they commented that only 40 of their members, and they're one of the largest unions in the state, only 40 of their members live in this district. And if we want to have any kind of job that we need, whether it's for our economy or for our public sector, those folks deserve to have housing in our communities and not just in some distant community where they have to take 4 buses to get here, right? So we absolutely have a challenge not only at the affordable level, but also at the missing middle income level. And the key is that we need additional units of housing pretty much everywhere at this point. The problem has kind of gotten to the point where there is no easy fix here, and we're going to need these solutions in every community. Every part of the state is having this challenge. You talk to folks on the Cape right now, they're having the same exact challenges. You talk to folks here, you talk to folks in Western Mass, you talk to folks on the North Shore. There's a housing crisis in almost every part of the state. And so we need the state to step up. There's a number of proposals that have stalled, that would help on this front. Things like the transfer fee that would pay for more affordable housing from the trust funds locally. We need additional zoning changes. We've been doing some work on that lately, but we're going to need a lot more. And the reality is just that it's going to take a lot of different solutions.
Yes, we go next to Rick Lipof.
Well, there's something called workforce housing, which is 110% of the AMI, and that could help if we push to include more. In our inclusionary zoning in Newton and in the 40B, you're able to choose certain levels, and we really need to advocate for more workforce housing for specifically this question. But we need to push overall for more zoning reform, not just MBTA communities, but we need to broaden our opportunities. The housing bill, the bond bill, which is anywhere from $4 billion to $6 billion, depending on the House, the governor, or the Senate, is chock full of reforms, ADUs, more money to the Housing Affordable Trust, a momentum fund to help these stalled affordable housing projects that are stalled because of construction costs. So to get those going and to fund those, there's a lot we can do. We're fighting the free market. The cost of the underlying land in Newton and Brookline is so high that creating affordable housing, purely affordable housing, is really difficult. So we need public-private partnerships, we need tax credits, we have to get creative.
I'll introduce you again, Greg Schwartz.
I just didn't know when the time started. Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
So, yeah, this is a problem that we're having because of our success. Our economic success in Massachusetts has drawn so many businesses and so much demand for workers that we don't have enough housing. All the studies show that we're way below the amount of housing that we need in the metropolitan area. So there are a number of ways to try to address this. One is to rely completely on the private market, which clearly is not a way to get where we need to go. It's a part of the solution, but it's not the solution. And that's what we've been really limited to primarily in our city development projects. We need the state, as Rick was mentioning, to really bring some either tax incentives or additional funding so that we can get the missing middle, as Bill mentioned it, to be built. Because if we rely on the free market, it's not going to happen. Newton and many other places in the state are just too valuable. The location drives the costs as well as the scarcity. So we can't rely on the free market. Secondly, we can start doing things outside the box. We can have rapid bus lines or even east-west rail to try to open up some of the communities that are currently more naturally affordable and that need of economic development that would benefit from better transportation and open up those areas for more housing. There's so much need that we should be firing on all cylinders, and that's what I would try to do with all my colleagues at the State House.
Thank you very much. We'll start the next question. How will you ensure transparency in your office, and what can you do to affect the transparency of the legislature? So we go back to our original order.
That would be me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Transparency. We all want it. We all know that it's something that people are screaming for at the State House, at the state level. I will tell you that I will be extremely transparent as your next state representative. I will do a weekly or a monthly newsletter. I will publish every vote. I will answer every question. I will tell you that being a city councilor and being a state rep are quite different jobs. And it's going to take some time when you get up there, not only to find where the bathrooms are and where your committee rooms are, but to get a lay of the land and to make relationships and to build bridges. And you can't do that confidently and successfully if you go up kicking and screaming. And I'll tell everybody that I'd like more transparency, but I'll tell you there's a way, there's a nuance to go to the State House and to become relevant and to find a way to change the culture from within. There's a way to do it, and going up and kicking and screaming isn't going to make that happen.
Thanks. So I agree with Rick. I mean, transparency is extremely important, and from a small d democratic point of view, how can the populace know what's going on if you aren't more transparent? Now, the journalists obviously provide a good amount of information. The State House News is extremely helpful. The committees are all televised this time, and hearings are advertised. So for those who are interested, you certainly can get a lot of information currently. What a state rep can do, and what I would commit myself to doing, is not only providing, whether it's weekly or monthly newsletters and information, but to be a conduit to those groups that are interested in certain particular issues. You know that they're working on an issue. You tell them when the hearings are. You try to make sure that they're at the hearings. You make sure that you follow up with them after the hearings. So in addition to whatever transparency we can get through, our colleagues and the leadership, we need to make sure that we are a source of transparency. And certainly my votes and my thoughts and my meetings will all be very transparent, just like they were on the City Council.
Well, I certainly think that we all share a commitment to transparency and accountability in both our office and the legislature. I personally come from a political communications and media background, and I think that that has become more critical than ever with the consolidation and actual closure of a lot of news sources that people used to rely on to be able to get their information. I've had a newsletter by email since before I was on the city council, quite regular, and I also send a physical letter in the mail to people in my district at least once a term to let them know what the major points of debate are and solicit their opinion on where we should be going, as well as offering what I think is the direction that I'm headed. I think responsiveness is certainly key as well from an individual office, not only being available to meet with, but getting back to people promptly, when they call or send an email, which is certainly something that I have prided myself on above all else as the ward councilor in Ward 5. And I think that's certainly a model that a lot of us got used to from Representative Balzer over the years, and I've tried to follow that model as a councilor. And I think, we need to be subject to the public records law like we are as councilors. Committee hearings need to be scheduled in advance. I support the Sunlight Act. And I think there's also just a challenge in general of an excessive level of centralization in the State House of Representatives right now, where there's just too much stuff being handled by too few people so that we're not actually getting votes on things. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, for our next question, we will start off with Rick
Schwartz.
Lipof.
No, I think it's Schwartz.
Schwartz, I'm sorry, Greg Schwartz. The question is, the Commonwealth has required MBTA communities to rezone for more housing. What do you believe the role of the legislature is in solving the housing crisis?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a repeat of some of the previous comments, but so the housing problem that we have, as I said, is extremely linked to our success as a state and our economy. So in addition to the points that we already made about the state having a role to play in filling the missing middle, what the state can do is also open up the possibility of public-private partnerships. There's a tremendous amount of state land that currently is in the possession of the state that could be a source and a location for extra housing. I'd like to see the state legislature create a framework for that so that we can make sure that that land is used in the most effective way. And we were able to see a benefit of that, for example, here in Newton, when the Armory property became available, was sold to the city for $1, and we were able to do a fully affordable project there, which added something more than 40 units, I believe, to the affordable housing stock. So there's more to be done at the state level, in addition to what we said before, that would include using state lands and using state initiatives to encourage these public-private partnerships, as well as state, city, and municipality projects.
I think at this point, it's becoming clear that the localities are not going to be able to solve a crisis at the level that we're at on housing. And I think that it's going to require pretty significant state intervention. I think there's it's an all of the above type of situation, right? Because any one particular policy is not going to be able to do enough. And certainly the market is not going to be, getting us out of this problem on its own. I think there's certainly a zoning component, especially around the middle income housing. Something I've talked about a lot is that there's no zone in Newton where you can build a triple decker by right, even though that's the type of sort of more modest housing that we've come to expect for young families young adults who have not yet started their families and are looking for affordable places to live that don't require the, affordable housing lottery system. Similarly, ADUs is a thing that, they're looking at right now, and we've looked at in both Newton and Brookline as local communities. There is the public financing component, whether it's public banking, whether it's low-income housing tax credit, whether it's at the local level with state permission, like the local option transfer fee. We, of course, need to work on transit reliability in order to make any of this actually work in practice. And then I would stress that we really need to be working with our labor unions closely on solving this crisis. That's something that I talked a lot about when I met with the carpenters and the iron workers, is that they're very focused on how they can affirmatively play a role in this and get involved. And not only to create jobs, but even potentially get involved in the financing side of some of these projects. And they have an interest in making this work, and I think we should be trying to work with them on it. Thank you.
Not to be redundant, I'll say I agree with my colleagues here, and past colleague. There's so much we can do, and some interesting things you may not know about that are in the housing bond bill. There is legislation to create new housing through allowing mills and malls to be converted quickly and easily to housing. That is a fantastic avenue. Using open space, creating more ADUs, which is part of the bond bill as well. Further zoning reform, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. You see how difficult it is to get MBTA communities. We're quite proud that we did that here in Newton. The MRT zone that we included around our town centers. It's complicated. As a real estate appraiser, I find issues with how much additional 4 to 6 unit buildings we could actually get because of the economics and the choice of the developer to still go with the underlying zoning or the MRT. But creating these MRT zones and pushing them out a little bit to allow maybe for triple deckers and other types of units is a good idea. We've talked about tax credits, and yes, without robust transit that's timely and efficient, the housing question is not going to completely work.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start off with Bill Humphrey. What lessons did you learn in City Council that you will apply to your work in the legislature?
Well, I think, I've been endorsed by my 3 closest collaborators over the past 4 years, former city councilors Alicia Bowman, Brenda Noel, and Holly Ryan. And we were able to work very effectively as a team on a whole range of issues. We met generally every week or every 2 weeks, including for lunch to discuss what was going on, what our strategy was, what was happening in different committees that we weren't on. And that's a key lesson, is that you can't do any of this alone, certainly. I think I've also demonstrated, for those who have worked with me on committees, that I am pretty effective at putting together coalitions, sometimes unlikely bedfellows, on those committees to enact certain policies. I always stress that, I'm certainly very progressive ideologically, that's not a secret. But because of that, I also know that a lot of my fellow elected officials are not starting out at the same point that I'm starting out at, which means that I have to be good at figuring out how to persuade them to get on board. And I can't assume that my position is the dominant position that everyone's sort of used to within the status quo. And I think that's something that I have certainly proven myself effective at. And it's something that I got very experienced at quite early in my political career when I worked on the campaigns for marriage equality and trans rights in Delaware. You can imagine some of the conversations we were having at the Delaware State Fair about that issue, almost a decade and a half ago. And so you have to be able to talk to a lot of different people coming from a lot of different places and figure out where your commonalities are and how you can get them on your side. Thank you.
I like people. I enjoy getting to know them. I enjoy building bridges and working in teams. I wouldn't be doing this job as a city councilor for 22 years if I didn't like the social aspect. I was elected in 1996 as an impatient 30-year-old, and over the decades, I was selected as vice president of the council, where I served working closely with President Albright and the mayor through COVID, which gave me a front seat to crisis and to budgeting like you would never believe. As chair of land use for 4 years, I learned quite quickly the nuance of getting to yes, to allow people to be heard and to work collaboratively to get some of the most difficult projects through and done. And I feel that there's been nothing more useful in the council level for my success at the State House than being chair of land use and working with the attorneys and the developers and the homeowners and the planning department and my colleagues to get things done. Thank you.
Yeah, so similarly, on the city council, I was on for 4 terms, that's 8 years, and during that time, I served as the land use chairman as well for 2 years. And, you know, one of the things that I thought was so important that sometimes was not always followed was an openness to varying points of view, not just among the public, which of course is very, very important to let everybody be heard, but among our colleagues. And that was something that I think was a breath of fresh air and was appreciated by my colleagues. The way that you work together is you don't have a black and white approach. You don't think that every issue is yes or no. You have to have a graded kind of appreciation for where people are coming from and try to meet them where they are and then try to bring them along to your viewpoint. I think that sometimes when you get into leadership, you might tend to believe that you have to push your agenda, and that's not something that I ever did on the Land Use Committee. I wanted to make sure that the chairman was probably the last person to speak, make sure that everybody else got a chance to speak and have their views heard. Thank you.
Okay, for the next question, Rick Lipof will be the first to respond. The question is, the MBTA is vital to our regional economy and is relied on by hundreds of thousands of people. What will you support to improve the T, and how will you as a state legislature help to bring the MBTA into the 21st century?
Oh, simple question. Look, we have got some positive things here. We've got Philip Eng, who is not a politician. He is an engineer, and he is doing, I believe, an incredible job advocating for money, for expanding the T, for renovating. The bottom line is there's never going to be enough money to do it all at once and to make it what we want right now. But we need progress, and I really feel like Mr. Eng is doing that. You know, transportation is a critical component to the state's infrastructure, and it is lacking modernization. Connectivity of the MBTA, that is what we need. I don't know if you saw the article about what Seth Moulton would love to do, 3 miles of north and south to really connect and finish the T to make it really robust. We need to fully fund whatever that is and advocate for. I will be behind. Transportation, climate, and housing has to be talked about every single time you talk about one. You have to put them together. And if you care about one of those things, you've got to talk about the 3. We've got to get people out of their cars. We've got to make them come home and not get back in, and have walkable streets, bike lanes. This is a holistic approach that as a state rep, I would be taking every day to be foremost in my mind.
So as someone who takes the T, the Green Line, D branch every day to and back to Longwood, I can tell you it's been a tough road recently. We've not only had some service disruptions because of service not being able to be maintained, but because of some of the improvements that Philip Eng is trying to make. I think that most of my co-riders and I and commuters everywhere will take a little bit of that if it's going to lead us to a better system. But we have seen too often that the T has not achieved its goals. So as in the state legislature, I think we need to keep their feet to the fire. We need to, if we do provide more funding, which we may have the ability to through the Fair Share Amendment that was passed, which is committed to transportation and education, we should be involved very closely with making sure that the MBTA comes back for review and oversight. Now, as has been mentioned, transportation is extremely important, and I'll just plug that because it is so important not only for the convenience of commuters, getting people out of their cars, making our state less reliant on fossil fuels in the tank, but it's also so important for housing, like we mentioned, because of the opening up of other areas, like I mentioned before, as well as the environment, the cleaning of our air, and everything that we do to get to and from work, we should be able to do on the T or on buses. Thank you.
Transportation is foundational to the idea of having a commonwealth for everyone. It's also foundational to making the other challenges solvable around climate and around housing. This is an issue that has been on my mind for literally my entire life because my dad was a career public transit planner for CTPS, the Central Transportation Planning Staff of the state of Massachusetts. And we spent every family vacation going around the United States visiting other public transit systems. So I'm very well versed in how to use the fare boxes in a bunch of random cities. The legislature is going to have to provide a tremendous amount of financial support for the T, and that also means making the political case for raising those revenues and getting people on board with that agenda. Now, some of that can come from things like the Fair Share Amendment, and some of that can come from various other specific mechanisms that are proposed in the latest CTPS report for MassDOT on new revenue sources. But, we are also going to probably have to get creative. I know that Representative Vitola is in the room, and he's mentioned about the suggestion that some other transit systems around the world use of special assessments around their new stations or renovated stations, or in this case, the MBTA Communities Act areas that we're rezoning. There's going to be a lot of wealth created there, and that's potentially a way of getting additional revenue for this maintenance. We need to get on top of deferred maintenance. It's a very long-term problem. We need to get more drivers, and we need to get the T out of its debt situation without cutbacks in service. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will start off with Greg Schwartz. The state legislature is based on seniority and relationship building. Whoever is elected will be starting as a freshman without Representative Balzer's seniority. This will put our district at a disadvantage. How will you go about building the necessary relationships in the state legislature to be an effective representative for the district?
Well, thank you for that question. I think it's extremely important, and I think it is actually an important issue among the three candidates. I believe that when you're at the State House, you need to build relationships that are built on trust and respect. And one of the things that is very, very important when you're working in these kinds of settings is to be a person of your word. You can't promise one thing and then do the other. And this is something that has been basically my coin of my realm. I'm very much a man of my word, whether it's been on the city council, whether it's been in my profession, with my patients and with my colleagues. So you need to build that respect. You need to serve in a manner that is honorable, and you need to have that kind of reliability. Now, I worked for 2 congressmen and a senator, as well as a member of parliament in the UK before going to med school. And I must tell you that I observed this front and center, that folks that worked together, that worked on policies in a manner that they respected each other, were reliable for each other, were the most effective. And the ones that were, playing to the crowd or to the grassroots and trying to, make news were often the ones that were less effective in their respective legislatures.
I think it's certainly an important question for us to be thinking about, because no matter who gets elected, they're probably going to be starting in the basement with one staffer and then trying to work their way up from there. And that's definitely a tough position to be in for anybody. I have known some of these state representatives as well as some of the state senators for a very long time, including in some cases before they were in the State House. I used to be on the board of Mass Alliance in my capacity representing the Mass Sierra Club. And I helped, go knock on doors for some of these folks before they were in office. And I think that I can build from there. I certainly know there's a few folks that are going to be my probably day one folks that I'm spending my time with. And then I'm excited to meet a lot of the others, especially after this next coming election. And I am very confident in my ability to sort of study the chamber. You know, we've got 160 representatives, find out what makes people tick. That's what I've always done on the city council. And certainly, you know, I think some people have a different approach, but that's the approach I've taken. And I think people definitely know where I stand and, you know, can count on that. And I would also say that I do think there is a role for incorporating the grassroots into public participation and into their own self-governance. I think that is critically important because that is also how you get some of your colleagues to change their minds, by hearing those personal stories from folks at testimonies and lobby days. Thank you.
I think experience matters, relationships matter, and that's how I've built my experience over 2 decades. My experience as vice president during COVID, working with the mayor closely, working with her staff and the department heads, that is invaluable to take to the State House when you are going to be working with multiple groups. I've gotten to know, which has been a joy, Representative Vitolo, Lon, and I'm excited to get to know everybody else. I have an open line of communication to our congressman who sat next to me, Jake Auchincloss, on the chamber floor, which is very useful. And it's just, in order to rise, you must build relationships. And that's getting things done, and that's what I've done my whole career. And it's something I'm excited to continue to do at the State House.
Okay, thank you. That does it for the submitted questions. Now we're going on to letting the candidates ask each of their opponents a question. The question may be the same to both of your opponents, or they may be different. That's up to you. The question should only be 15 seconds long, so not to steal the show. So in that regard, we're going to start with Bill Humphrey.
So I guess I'll start with my first question to former Councilor Schwartz. You've talked a lot about healthcare policy. How do you say you would handle a situation on healthcare policy where there are vested interests that are opposing change, including perhaps your own hospital, but just anybody that's, you know, kind of resisting that change that you want to enact?
Thanks, Bill, for the question. So I first of all want to say that I have no affiliation with the leadership of the Mass General Brigham. In fact, as one of their employees now, I guess, which we're all being treated as you probably have read in the papers, I don't know if they even want me to be elected, because I'm sure that I might be negatively viewing their efforts. I think that the knowledge that I bring on healthcare is, you know, an insider's knowledge, which is so important. If elected, I'd be the only one medical doctor out of the 200 state legislators at the State House. And I think that while we're facing so many challenges right now in healthcare, whether it's steward, for-profit, hedge fund funded network going bankrupt, or what we're seeing in the emergency rooms backed up because of the lack of options to get people into the hospital or out of the hospital to skilled nursing facilities, we need that inside knowledge. And I would be very hopeful that I'd be able to provide that to my colleagues. Obviously, there are many people who have been working on policy at the State House for a very long time who I want to learn from as well. But I think that inside knowledge is very helpful, and I don't think there'd be any conflict at all. Thank you.
And for Councilor Lipof, what would your next steps be in a situation where leadership is not interested in moving forward or shifting their position on an urgent issue, and you have already had a conversation about it with them?
Say that again, please.
What would your next steps be in a situation where leadership is not interested in moving forward or shifting their position on an urgent issue, and you've already had a conversation with them about it?
Well, one conversation isn't enough. I can have another conversation. I can get together with other colleagues who feel the same way that I do, and we can advocate for whatever change or whatever position we have. You don't give up. Eventually, sometimes you have to move on. But if I felt very strongly about my position, I would try to change some minds. And sometimes leadership can be malleable.
Okay, so now we go to Rick Lipof to ask questions of his opponents.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, Mr. Schwartz, we spent 2 years working with the community stakeholders on the Northland project for the best of Newton. In the end, you did vote no. My question is, would you still vote the same way today in light of the urgency of the state's housing crisis?
Thanks, Rick. That's a great question. I appreciate it. It actually enables me to explain that. So as you pointed out, I was chair of the committee while you were vice chair, and we listened to all parties in that discussion. And I really tried to find a way to get us to yes, but the project was not a good one. The project was not transit oriented. It's nearly a mile away from the T. We cobbled together a shuttle bus that was not adequate, in my view, to address the already existing significant congestion and traffic on Needham Street. The only thing that probably would have solved the problem would be if the developer had agreed to either reduce the number of units or stage it, which they were entirely resistant to. I supported all the other projects that came before us, the Riverside project, the Trio project, the Austin Street project, just every project. This is the only project that I voted against, but I had to vote against it because I knew that it was not gonna be a good project for the community and the traffic on Needham Street. And that's actually a distinction that I think is important to make, which is our role on the city council and certainly our role in state legislature is not to be rubber stamps. We need to think independently, even when it takes some courage.
Thanks for that. Bill, if you make it to the State House, what 3 committees would you want to be on and why?
My top priority is to be on the committee that oversees utilities regulation. I think that's certainly one that affects a lot of people's day-to-day life the most. I mean, certainly people encounter whether it's gas leaks or trenching in the roads and so forth. And so I think that's the top priority one. I'm also interested in working on labor relations issues and labor law. And so the committee that oversees that issue, which, touches on a lot of economic justice issues, I think I would certainly be honored to serve on that one. And I've always had a passion for the rules and mechanics of government. And I served on the rules subcommittee previously at the city council level. And so any of the committees that deal with whether it's Ways and Means or the rules themselves or any of those committees, I think I would certainly be a very happy camper on. Thank you.
Okay, now, excuse me, to go to Greg Schwartz to ask his 2 questions of his opponents.
Okay, so this is for Rick. Rick, I know that you've done a lot with real estate. You've mentioned your real estate appraisal firm and you've developed some properties. And you've been on the land use committee like I was. And I understand that you've had a lot of support from the real estate community in your fundraising. How is it that you would be able to put the interests of the population ahead of the interests of the real estate developers?
Oh, there it is. Quite simply, one has nothing to do with the other. If there are 2 or 3 people who develop that have given me money, I could take money from many developers. The 2 or 3 that I have happen to be lifelong friends that grew up on my street and went to high school with me. I have done 2 or 3 development deals in my life, and they have been one in Newton and the rest have been in Boston. My main business, that is 99% of what I do, is an appraisal business. We support when you buy a house or you refinance, they base it on an appraisal. And I've been doing that for 33 years. And all the banks are my clients and the attorneys, and it's an expertise. And we have an expertise in development consulting, where we can look at a piece of land and figure out exactly if you do this, it will be worth that based on the cost and based on the purchase. So we're analysts, and that's what my company does, and there is no blurring of any lines where anybody owns me at all.
Oh, and then Bill, so in light of recent events, I know that in 2022, the City Council wrote a letter opposing the mapping project, which was deemed anti-Semitic on the part of the ADL. Would you change your vote, being the only one out of the 24 members of the council that did not sign that letter denouncing it?
Yeah, just to clarify, it wasn't a voted item. It was, I think, Councilor Lipof wrote it and then circulated it. So I'll certainly, yes, to the immediate question, yes, the context that we're in now, given everything that has happened since October 7th, is a completely different context. And I certainly have had a lot of conversations with folks. And, I think that's no question if it were coming around this time. I think we can also stipulate everyone in this race, everyone on this stage takes anti-Semitism very seriously. I know I certainly do, even though I am not Jewish. I grew up on the south side of Newton. I went through the Newton public schools, and awareness of this issue and the history is a foundational thing you learn in this community. I didn't sign the letter in 2022 for one simple reason, which I explained to anyone who wrote to me at the time asking about it. I believe it's not always responsible for elected officials to shine a huge spotlight on every single fringe project that's problematic on the internet. Again, different context now than what we were in, and I understand that people had a different approach to why they felt that it was important. I will say also, I don't think that Councilor Lipof ever called me about it to have a conversation as to why I was maybe not signing it or maybe had some concerns with the letter. I think that probably would have been helpful. And, I think that, like I said, we're in a different context now. But I think that sometimes our job as elected officials is to promote safety, not promote fear. Thank you.
Are we allowed to respond? Are we allowed to respond?
Do you feel that you were misrepresented in something? Under the,
Yes, I was.
okay. go
Thank
ahead.
you. That letter was written by Councilor Susan Albright and myself. It was supported by our congressman, our mayor, 23 of 24 of us. Anti-Semitism has been a problem before October 7th. And it was a problem back then. And please do not blame me as one of the writers of this to reach out and explain to you why the mapping project was such a terrible thing. 23 of the 24 of us got it, and I don't think it needed any more explanation at the time.
Okay, well, we don't want to go on all night back and forth on this one issue, but Bill Humphrey, do you want to have anything briefly to say in response to that?
Well, again, the reason I signed was not because I didn't have a concern about anti-Semitism, but I think the reason that I was bringing that up is that you have emphasized listening, having conversations with people, trying to get people to your perspective. Clearly, there seemed to be some sort of a breakdown that happened there, and I think there were members who signed because they didn't want to get yelled at politically in forums like this, and so I don't think that was necessarily the way to go on this. And I understand that we're in a different context right now and that people disagree with my decision, but I did not sign it because I felt that we should not be spotlighting every single fringe project on the internet. There are unfortunately a lot of them, but when there are anti-Semitic incidents in the ward, I've certainly always reported those to both the Anti-Defamation League and the local authorities in Newton.
We are now going to move on to questions from the audience. And this time we'll start with Rick Lipof. Ruth Balzer was a champion in the areas of mental health and substance abuse, as well as environmental issues. What issues do you see yourself as a champion of?
Well, I wish I was at the State House right now because with my 33 years of owning a real estate company in valuation and consulting, along with my experience in land use and as an elected official, I would like to have a front row seat at one of our biggest problems right now, which is a lack of housing, which is attached to climate and transportation. I think everybody up here they can talk about their own job that they have right now and what they take in that job to the State House. And that's exactly what Ruth Balzer did, and Kay Khan with mental health, and Cindy Cream as a lawyer and an advocate. I really believe that my strength in housing at this moment is critical, and I'm uniquely qualified to have a seat at the table with some unique, absolute unique solutions to the problem.
So I'll just mention that, my medical background, I've talked about it before. I don't want to keep saying it, but I do think that at this moment in time, we are facing tremendous amount of dislocation in our healthcare system. Massachusetts is a mecca for healthcare. People come from all over the world to some of our hospitals to get care. I've been lucky enough to work in some of those hospitals, but it's all not good right now. We have problems with access, we have problems with quality, we have problems with cost, and we're now facing, in addition, a problem that is almost self-created, right? Which is that we allowed the fox into the hen house, right? We allowed the for-profit healthcare in, and Steward came in, and they ran 8 hospitals into the ground, and so now we have bankrupt hospitals that are potentially going to throw tens of thousands of patients into an uncharted future. So this is a very, very critical time for our healthcare system, and I would bring that knowledge and experience. And I would add that I also have a law degree, and I think that it's very important right now in the times of reproductive rights being under threat, voting rights being under threat all over our country, that to have an understanding of the legal principles and the legal processes so that we can develop legislation that'll protect us no matter what happens in November. Not in this election.
So prior to serving on the city council, the issues that I had the most experience and time working on were environmental issues and LGBTQ rights. And on the council, I've had the opportunity to also work on the housing issues. I think, as I've said throughout, climate, housing, and transportation are going to be the core focuses for me. But certainly there's a lot of areas that we're all going to need to be pushing on. That includes healthcare, reproductive rights, some of the other inclusion and equity issues that are facing our society, the economic justice issues. Fortunately, a lot of these things can be folded in to a Green New Deal approach. By putting climate first and taking a comprehensive approach to how to solve those problems, and trying to do them the right way with as many partners as we can in the community and across the state, I think we can make really good progress on a huge number of these issues, and we're going to get better outcomes on housing, and we're going to get better outcomes on transportation. We're also going to get better outcomes on those issues around economic inequality and health injustices and things like that. So we can make a lot of progress if we pursue a Green New Deal for our Commonwealth.
Okay, the next question from the audience, and we'll start with Greg Schwartz. Do you feel that foreign immigrants impose unfunded mandates on our cities and towns? Should Massachusetts alter its sanctuary status?
So this is an issue that I do hear sometimes at the doors and at the get-togethers that we have in this campaign. People are very supercharged sometimes on this issue. Let's just remember, this is not a state-created issue. This is a federal issue. Our federal government, for political reasons, primarily on the part of the GOP, has been stalled at addressing this problem. So we have borders that are unfortunately not doing the job that they need to do. That said, we have plenty of people who are in our state who need our help. And as someone who's committed my life to taking care of people, I cannot abide people who are ready to completely pull up the the latter and say, no, we're not going to take care of you. In fact, it's not even just out of moral imperative. It's self-interest. I mean, really, do you not want to have people? Do you want to have people living in the airport terminals? Do you want to have people living under the bridges? Does that make you not only feel bad, but also put you at some risk for health and safety? This is not what we want as a state, and that's why I'm very proud to live in Massachusetts. I'm also very proud of the governor, who has tried, within the constraints of the situation, to do the right thing, and the legislature as well, to try to find a way to make the budget work while also achieving our goals of taking care of people.
I'll note up top that the question is a little bit distorted itself. Massachusetts isn't a sanctuary state. It's not even passed the Safe Communities Act, which is something that I support, and they have been putting loopholes in the longstanding right to shelter. Even if we had no migration crisis right now, we would still be having an emergency shelter crisis in our state with the folks that were already living here, which means we need to address it either way. And I certainly believe, and many folks at the doors have said, that we have a responsibility and an ability to take care of these people. The question is just, how are we doing it, and are we doing it in the most cost-effective way possible? We spend the most amount of money on putting people up in hotels on a day-by-day basis, feeding them on a day-by-day basis. We need a permanent long-term plan here, not a day-to-day plan. This needs to be funded over a longer period of time because it's not going to be going away in a short amount of time. And that would be true even if there were nobody coming from abroad. I also think it's important to note that a lot of the causes of this migration, although there's obviously a federal, congressional dimension to this, relates to the climate crisis and its effects in the developing world, especially in the regions that are closer to the equator. And that's where we see a lot of the folks coming from. And we also know that U.S. foreign policy has been very damaging to a lot of the countries where these folks are coming from. And that is inextricably linked to why people are coming, trying to find a better opportunity, because their countries have been destroyed back home. And so we certainly have even more of a responsibility to take care of them.
I agree with everything my two colleagues here have said. It's $1 billion. It was $900 million this year. It will be $1 billion to take care of our shelter system. I watched as our governor, who has a very large heart, cap the stay at 9 months in the shelter system. And she did this because this is what it is to be a governor, to be a state rep, to be a state senator. You've got to make the tough decisions. There are people that say, we've just got to take care of everybody. We do. But at 9 months, it allows the system to not implode and work for nobody. So we take care of everybody, and we must find programs and get work permits more quickly to people. You can't just kick them out of the shelter. You need to have a plan, and this is the kind of work that we do at the State House, and this is the kind of work that comes out of the blue. 5 years ago, no problem. Now we've got $1 billion shelter system. What are we going to do about it? These are the tough decisions that excite me to be a part of, to work on for the best of the Commonwealth.
Okay, for our next question, we will start off with Bill Humphrey. Do you support amending the bottle bill to add water bottles?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Rick,
yes.
Yeah. I think that there's, from what I understand, there's a couple issues with it. The states and cities that have done this have seen a tremendous increase in the collection of recyclables, which has been a very important outcome of it, and that's the goal. The impact is not only on the animals and waterways, but also on the ability to maintain a viable recycling program, which is able to pay for itself and be successful. So I think that the only negative I think that probably could be imagined is we probably don't want to encourage people to use plastic bottles, right? We've been trying for a long time to try to get people onto reusables. So that would be obviously, yeah, we were given these, okay? So that is one thing that you could see as an unintended consequence. And just so we can talk about a little bit about this. So a lot of legislative work is not just solving the problem in front of you, but it's thinking about how your solution is going to potentially play out. And so you always have to think about the future when you're making policy. When I worked on the tobacco control efforts, we were always stymied by the fact that the labels that had been put on cigarette advertisements and packages were actually shielding the companies from liability. We don't want to make bad policy. Thank you.
Okay, for the next question, we'll start off with Rick Lipof. What will you do to support local businesses?
I am a local small business, and I deal with all the small taxes, and I deal with all the issues and the hurdles. And what I will do is anything I can in my power at the State House. One of the greatest joys, as I said, Rep. Balzer and Barney told me, was all of the associations and the people that come to you constantly to let you know, these are our problems. These are our new problems. How can you help? And my door is going to be open, and it's going to be especially open to the small business community that I've been a part of for my whole career.
So I haven't looked at the statistics recently, but from what I recall, it's been said that small businesses are actually the engine of growth for the economy, but the U.S. economy, and I'm sure it's probably partly true in Newton as well, and in Brookline. The importance of small business cannot be overestimated. It's an opportunity for folks to take their entrepreneurial spirit and build something, and oftentimes they hire folks that are needing an opportunity to start in an area, and they can collect experience. The issues that small businesses face, though, are very different from what larger businesses face. And I don't need to tell Rick this probably, but whether it's liability insurance, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the taxes that we sometimes forget can hit small businesses more harshly than we think. We think of these large businesses that can handle it, but small businesses often are running on a very fine edge of profitability. So I think that as a state representative, to help small businesses, I think the most important thing would be to have an understanding of what they're facing in the economic climate, whether it's, and as we put more restrictions or demands or regulations onto industries, to remember that there are small businesses in those industries that might need to be considered and might need adjustments.
I would also let the audience know there's going to be a debate coming up in a few weeks that the Chamber of Commerce is hosting, where I think we're going to get really deep into a lot of these issues specifically in more than just a minute and a half or so. I think there's a number of things that can certainly be done, and we do need to focus pretty heavily on small businesses because, as we've all seen from our work at the municipal level, these are the businesses that have survived the pressures of internet competition and are trying to hang on in our village centers, in our economic areas that create the sort of character that we know and love in our communities. These are the ones that are the unique businesses that don't look like every other business on the block and that kind of thing. They do face certainly some unique challenges, but there's also unique opportunities that can be done through regulatory and zoning changes to help them out a little bit more. For example, we know that smaller footprint storefronts tend to favor small business compared to the big chain locations. So if all your zoning is geared toward huge commercial property spaces, that's going to get you a lot more national fast food chain type things, right? And so I think there's a lot that can be done on that front to make sure that we're encouraging them to thrive, and then also avoiding some of the challenging practices by some of the major corporations. For example, an emerging threat to our local restaurants has been around ghost kitchens that sort of provide manipulative online food services that outcompete actual local businesses here. Thank you.
Okay, for the next question, we'll start with Greg Schwartz. how will your professional experience inform your representation of your district? And how does that differentiate you from the other candidates?
Can I just say yes? I'll just try to take a slightly different tack. So my professional experience, while I know you guys have heard, is in the medical field. In addition to medicine, I've been trained in law and have worked in policy and obviously on the city council. So it's not just the medical experience that I would be bringing to the State House. That said, in the district, we have many people who work in the healthcare industry, whether it's as doctors, nurses, social workers, psychologists. I've met so many people in the profession, really, in the healthcare professions. As I've been talking to people during this campaign, it's been really quite remarkable. And Newton and Brookline really is a powerhouse and a concentration of folks in this sector. In addition, I've met a lot of people who are involved in biotech, and that's another huge part of our economy in Boston and in the Massachusetts area, and it's been driving a tremendous amount of growth and jobs. So I think that my background professionally does bring a tremendous amount of opportunity for folks who live here, whether it's Newton or Brookline, and work here in those industries, to be heard and have somebody who is an insider who understands how the policies might affect their businesses and their lives more than somebody who might just read it in a book.
So, like many millennials, I've had a varied and interesting career rather than the, pick one thing and stick with it for your whole working life. And I think that certainly gives me a range of interesting perspectives and backgrounds that will help with this job. But as I said, my background is in political communications and media. And I think that in an era when there has been consolidation of the media at the state level and there has been a decline in local media, it's hard to get information. And having that communications background and prioritizing that two-way communication with constituents is going to be very important to doing this type of job and making sure that I'm doing it effectively. I also obviously do factor in the door knocking as well as part of that, because you get to hear the full range of opinions. But we've all been doing door knocking this year, so I'm not going to claim that that's entirely unique to me. I think that I am also have a background as a magazine editor at a foreign policy magazine, which involved a lot of writers that were retired from government in a range of different countries, especially in the European Union. And I got to work very closely with some of these folks who have achieved the highest heights of political power in their respective careers and have, interesting and thoughtful perspectives that I was able to learn from and learn about sort of the global context for a lot of these local and state issues. I always say all of the issues are the same at every level, whether it's local, state, national, or global, but it's just a question of where you're meeting people at on it. Thank you.
Well, I've already spoken about my small business experience and as a real estate expert, what I bring to the table, but I've already spoken about that. I'd like to take a little turn here and talk about what else in my life informs me, and that's my family. And I have a daughter who's an incredible artist. She got that gift from above, but also worked on it through the Newton school systems. And that has informed me at how important the arts and theater and music is to the educational experience. It's the color that brings about the connection to the math and reading and writing. My other daughter just got her master's in special education. I wanted her to come back. She's going to New York, has a classroom already, but through her life, since she was 8, she brought children with Down syndrome and autism into our home. And it informs me at how important it is for us to support our special education in our schools. And my wife, who beat breast cancer in her 40s, cancer research is so important. Ruth Balzer has a bill right now for equity for all women, to not just have screening for mammograms, but diagnostics, and not every insurance company and not every person, especially marginalized populations of color, have the opportunities that we all have. And if it's missed and you don't have diagnostics, that's life. So these are the things that inform me even more than my day job.
Okay, looks like a final question. Bill Humphrey will start. Do you support, Governor Dukakis's devoted efforts for north-south rail? Do you support that concept?
Well, certainly in my household, I was raised to have a lot of respect for Governor Dukakis, as he was certainly a transportation enthusiast, as the question implies, and that was a key part of my dad's step into the Central Transportation Planning Staff Office. And I always enjoy talking to him. That being said, respectfully, I do not agree with him on the north-south rail link. It is a very low priority for me because the sheer amount of money involved versus what the benefit would be. There are a tremendous number of public transportation projects in the state of Massachusetts that would be a better use of the same exact amount of money and provide vastly greater service. So I don't agree with him on that one, unfortunately. I wish I did, but it's something that I've thought about a lot over the last 10 years, and no one has successfully made the case to me that that should be a higher priority for that use of funds than a lot of the other funding that we could put elsewhere.
I have to say I agree with Congressman Moulton and what he wants to do here. I know there are priorities, and we can debate that, and it would be interesting. But let's just make it a dream, and let's just make it something that potentially we can get the money from the federal government, we can piece it together. It's 3-4 miles to connect. It is a huge undertaking. We have a hangover still from the Big Dig. I know we do, and this would be another one. But just think about it if we could do it, what it would open up. I believe the amount of jobs and the amount of income to this state would be tremendous if we could get it done. Is there a rate of return, Bill, that's going to work? I'd have to take a look at that. But I'm a dreamer, and I believe that is something that would just ignite our transportation system in the most positive way.
So I would just say that I think, Bill, you just lost Mike Dukakis's endorsement. But
He doesn't endorse.
But Rick is pushing for it, so maybe he'll get it. Actually, I worked for Mike Dukakis in 1988 as a student for Dukakis on his presidential campaign. Went down to Atlanta, was so excited when we were winning by 18% over Bush, but didn't last. But I've reminded of that every now and then when I talk to him. North-South Rail, I gotta say, I'm gonna plead ignorance. I'm gonna say that I would look at it because I think that there's obviously arguments on both sides. I did read the article, and I have been interested in East-West Rail that Seth Moulton has been promoting. The opportunity to open up areas of our state, as I mentioned before, is potentially a game changer when it comes to housing and economic development. The question has always been, though, do you need to do it with rail systems, or can you do it with rapid bus lines and other alternatives that are so much cheaper and more quickly will be online? And maybe would be a stepping stone to showing the benefits, and then you can go further. But as we saw with the Medford extension of the Green Line, it's not easy when you start putting down rail and you don't do good oversight. So any huge project like this would have to be very carefully vetted, whether we got federal money or not.
My apologies for my voice. I'm suffering from allergies, so you didn't get anything from me, Bill Humphrey. Allergies.
I can help you with that later.
So we're going on to the closing statements. We'll start with Rick Lipof.
Thank you very much to everybody who came out tonight, and thank you, Joe, for moderating. I would like to thank the Democratic City Committees as well. As you can see, we are three caring Democrats, all stepping up to say, "Here I am." I know from all the conversations I've had throughout the district that there is respect for all of us, and I'm proud to be a part of that. What sets me apart is experience, and experience matters. My 22 years of service is unique among us. Over the past 2 decades, I've worked tirelessly to better the community I live in. I worked with the executive branch through COVID and through the painful years after. And as land use chair, I oversaw some of the most significant developments to the finish line. I've gone from an impatient 30-year-old first-time alderman to a seasoned city councilor ready to take my experience, leadership, and wisdom to the State House. I promise to always keep an open door to you and to forward our values through crafting policy statewide. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your attention. Many of you stayed, which is terrific. This is a terrific turnout. We tried to bore you, but you guys stayed, and nonetheless. I'm Greg Schwartz. I'm running to be your next state representative from the 12th Middlesex District. I'm proud to have Ruth Balzer's endorsement. I also am proud of my unique perspective that I think I would bring to the State House to work for you as your champion on the most important issues of our time. Those experiences are my lifelong experiences. More than 20 years working as a primary care physician, taking care of people one by one in the hospital when they're sick and in the clinic when they're healthy, trying to prevent future ills that they may encounter by acting in the present. That's a perspective, a data-driven perspective, a collaborative perspective that I want to bring to the State House for you. And I think that with that perspective, as the only doctor out of the 200 members in the state legislature, I can deliver just like Ruth did. Thank you very much.
I'm Newton City Councilor Bill Humphrey. I'm asking for your support on September 3rd. My website is billhumphrey.org if you'd like to check out my policy platform. What I bring to this is a commitment to constituent services and communications, a deep understanding of the policy challenges facing us, and a focus on the political strategy necessary to execute on those policy goals. This is the work that I have always done before I was on the City Council, and I'm looking forward to continuing that work at the State House with my colleagues who have endorsed me from Mass Alliance, Progressive Massachusetts, the Mass Nurses Association, the Newton Teachers Association, and many, many of our labor unions across the state who are saying that I am the person whose door they want to be knocking on in the next term when it's time to get their issues moving forward in a State House that has regrettably not gotten a tremendous amount done over the last 18 months. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you to all the candidates. Thank you for people. Thank you to the committees who sponsored this debate. Thank you for everyone who showed up. Thanks for everybody who watched on television. Before we close, I want to recognize 2 people here. Representative Tony Vitolo, a state representative from Brookline, who also represents our district on the Democratic State Committee. And Governor's Counselor Marilyn Devaney is with us as well. Please remember that whoever is nominated in the September 3rd Democratic primary will be the next representative of the district, because there are no Republican, third party, or independent candidates. So your vote on September 3rd will determine the outcome. Thank you again, everyone.